RWBY has come so far, guys. Hi there, everyone, it's me, TheDomotaku, and today we're talking about RWBY Volume 5 Finale, Episode 14. Now, to be honest, I kind of forgot that RWBY was airing and was a thing, for one, because back in the day when we used to watch RWBY, it was pretty easy. You go on roosterteeth.com, you didn't have your first account or anything, you just watched it. And then now, it's just like, subscribe and stuff, and then you watch it, you RWBY Rooster Teeth first and stuff. And it's not like I don't hate that sort of system, you know. I understand if they want to like have, you know, that sort of system, but then it's just like, okay, it kind of slowed me down on watching my RWBY. I think I watch it on YouTube now, and I'm just like, oh yeah, it's been an extra week, and then this is last week's episode, and there's something new coming out today or this week, and I'm just like, oh wow, I need to catch up eventually. But I finally caught up, and the finale's here, so I get to talk a lot about RWBY, even though I haven't really been talking about the series at all in this channel for much. Like the whole Volume 5 thing. I've talked about Volume 4 just a little bit. Well, is that Volume 4 or is that 3? I forget exactly. But I talked about RWBY on the channel somewhat. But I haven't talked about Volume 5 period at all. So here's all my thoughts and feelings for this whole volume. So, for one, things have changed for RWBY, and I understand that ever since like the whole situation and deal with Monty, I understood that, you know, things were gonna change for the series. Like they saw that with Volume 3, and just, you know, RWBY's somewhat different, but it's still RWBY. I still enjoy it, cause like I hear a lot of like debate and complaints and like just things on the internet about RWBY Volume 5, and you know, even though I enjoy it, you know, I could see what they're talking about, and you know, there are some things about Volume 5 that just didn't click with me. I didn't hate it to a point. I was like I didn't feel like I was bored out of my mind. I was like, oh, this shouldn't have been in here or anything like that. I just thought like, oh, they're doing this, and then next episode I'll be like, oh shoot, they're doing this or something like that. You know, RWBY Volume 5 wasn't boring. It wasn't like the worst volumes or season ever. It was actually, you know, not that bad, and you know, there were like a lot of shit to the mind-blowing things at the end of the episodes of, or towards the later part of the series, like last episode or last 2 episodes, when you think certain people are gonna die and shit. I'm just like, oh shit, like no, that's impossible. And it was like, yeah. So there were moments in this episode, in this volume, that were pretty good, and then there were moments where they were less enjoyable, and that's mostly the whole Blake thing. But it's over now, so you don't have to worry about that stuff, right? So so much happened from Volume 3. So of course the whole new arc, so after Volume 3 of course, was a huge change with RWBY in the animation and everything, and the direction. And now that this arc is somewhat complete, because they had to, you know, Volume 4 was like, what happened at the end of Volume 4? I don't remember exactly. I think Volume 4, they arrived here. Oh yeah, they did arrive here. Well, so much happened in this volume. So essentially, you know, we find out a lot about the Spring Maiden. So many villains die, like Cinder, and you know, we have the characters united. RWBY reunited. Good job, good job. It's about time we saw these guys together, and it was pretty emotional. I liked it. It was really happy, and that's it. And essentially, to summarize this whole volume and this episode, they got a win. That is a victory if I've not seen it. So they beat Adam, and they're trying to change the White Fang and the whole Faunus situation, right? They got a relic from Haven. The headmaster who betrayed them died, so forget about him. But essentially, they got the relic and saved Haven. That's a win in my situation. Now they just have to protect the relic and essentially find the other maidens, and then find the other relics for the other schools, and then now they have to confront Salem. But you have somewhat most of the cast here now, because you have Blake here, and they're like, I'm not going anywhere, period. She's staying. There's no more splitting off and whatnot. And you have Weiss here too. And you know, one of the things that this volume I think does really great is that, you know, after Volume 3, it was a huge hit. It was like the huge, like a turning point for RWBY, because shit went down. And then Volume 4 and 5 essentially split the characters apart, and essentially had to put them towards their own trials, their own issues and conflicts and whatnot, their own journey. And essentially, it all came down to this point, episode 14, when they all come back together as a team. Weiss, who was being held hostage in her family home and situation, and her brother and dad, she left and on her own, and went to join her friends. Blake, who, you know, ashamed of what happened in Volume 3, went back home to the Faunus thing and wanted to sort out the White Fang and her whole background of her past with Adam and everything. And then it just sort of brought her back here with them, who, you know, it's like destiny or fate or coincidence or something like that. I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. And then Yang, of course, finally got over the past trauma with Adam and her arm, and she's continuing to fight and went to join and help RWBY. And RWBY, of course, being, you know, the main character, she's okay somewhat, and she's happy that her friends and her whole team is reunited again. And even John and Juniper got freaking character development throughout this volume, because Jean finally establishes his dang superpowers as aura of healing people, so that's really good. They didn't ever have a healer, to my knowledge, in this whole series ever, period. So they have a healer, good. You had that whole thing with Ren and Nora, and you know, they're getting a little bit closer, which is really, everyone ships those two. And I think that's about it. You even had like Yang and Raven, and I was like, oh shoot, we finally get to see a lot of Raven, and her fight scene with Cinder was freaking amazing. Oh my goodness. See, there's not too much fighting in this volume, but then when the fighting happened, it's pretty good. I'll say that. So yeah, I mean, like, so far, of course, there's like moments in this time in the volumes where it's awesome, and then sometimes the moments in the volumes when it's not too awesome, but still good, because essentially, you know, one of the things that RWBY was so known for probably back in the day and with Monty around in the first 3 volumes was the fighting and everything. But you know, RWBY has grown up to be so like expand on everything from a huge plot and story point now, that you can't just have a lot of fighting and everything. And of course the fighting's there, but then there's a huge like story development, because what I hear a lot on the internet is that everyone was so bored with Blake's whole arc and her being in the Faunus Island and stuff, and just being apart from everywhere else. And to be honest, I was sort of like feeling that too. It's not that I found it boring, it's just that when it was time for like Blake scenes, and when you're like in the main team and then you had to transition to Blake, I'm just like, oh man, I want to see what happens with them. And you know, Blake's just like having those issues with her Faunus and the whole situation with the White Fang and everything. I'm just like, okay, eventually this is gonna, you know, resolve itself. But then when it comes back to RWBY and them, I'm just like, oh yes, let's get back into it. And of course, I think that actually Blake's whole arc was done justice here. It's done, it's resolved. You have the White Fang come together, she helps save her friend, I forget her name. And then now I'm surprised. Okay, I'll admit, Adam kind of seemed a little bit kind of weaker in this volume. Like, he seemed like a badass in volume 4, freaking cut off someone's arm and beat the shit out of Blake. But I think, like, you know, at that time Blake was sort of like hesitant, and now in this volume she's sort of more resolved to just leave her past away and then, you know, continue moving on for the future. So she kicked his ass. Nice. And yeah, so Blake's arc's done. Weiss, interesting enough, you know, she had her whole moments in episode 4 and 5, and then essentially when she decided to leave her household and help RWBY and join her friends, that was it. Like, every single person's arc has essentially concluded, because it went from volume 3, shit goes down, everyone goes their separate ways, and now you have Blake, who, with the White Fang, she comes back. Weiss with her family and just being held hostage in her family situation, she comes back. Yang and her trauma comes back, and RWBY, the whole team RWBY's back, basically. And I think that's like the starting point for in volume 6, where now you can have all the characters together. You won't have all these huge side plots and everything, but now we'll have everything in one continuous place, because everyone's together. As they quote in the actual episode, they're not going anywhere. So now it's just a matter of what's next for RWBY, which is a very good question, because there's no trailer or anything for volume 6 or anything. So I'm just left for speculation. Now, there is a one end credit scene towards the end, and interestingly enough, I think that Raven is going to have a lot of character development, or like more redemption in the coming volumes, because essentially, you know, Raven is you have the good guys like RWBY and them and Crow and what's his name, Osvin, somewhat. I don't exactly know if they're doing good, but I feel like there's something like a twist going on in the future. And then you have Salem, who's evil, clearly. And then you have Ravens in the middle, who doesn't want to be good because she doesn't trust Osvin for shit. And then who, you know, just wants to be on her own and doesn't want to work for Salem. But essentially, you know, it comes to a time where she's gonna have to join her side. And she chose to fight for herself, and because she killed Cinder, which was freaking badass. And, you know, she left. So, and the whole talk with her and Yang in this episode felt like really convincing, where she's the one running away and she has all this power being a maiden and shit, right? And but then Yang, who, you know, took some losses with her arm and trauma and everything, she's still going. And I think that like puts a huge expectation for Raven to, you know, follow her daughter's example and somewhat maybe join them. And she even visits their dad in the end of the scene, where you see the feather fall towards the thing, and then you just know that the dad's like, oh, she's here. And it was like, what is that? That's not like a tease for volume 6. It's just a scene to conclude, or somewhat maybe tease about Raven and her development in volume 6 in the future, maybe, because that one, or, you know, maybe just like, there's a lot of speculation. I don't know where to go with this, but honestly, so volume 5 was good. I think that, you know, volume 4 was the first time they changed the animation style. They had the kinks and everything, and volume 5 was just, it was good. Now, RWBY volumes 4 through 5 do feel a little bit different. It's not the animation, it's just the direction and the sort of atmosphere that I feel in the episodes, and I don't dislike it. I know that everyone's gonna bring up Monty and stuff, but then I still feel that RWBY volume 5 and 6 and RWBY series going onwards can still, you know, come up with a good story and, you know, have a good plot where essentially we'll get to a conclusion where we'll somewhat be satisfied and hopefully no one dies, because we don't want to have another Pyrrha or another, what's her name? I forget. It's Pyrrha and then Penny. Yes, we don't want to have another one of those two, okay? I flipped the fuck out when freaking Weiss could have potentially died. I was like, oh my goodness, you're gonna have a main character in RWBY die, and it was enough having Yang lose her arm and shit. I'm just like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna die. I'm not gonna enjoy this. A lot of tension in the series, but, you know, with a happy ending, somewhat, as all fairy tales do. So until volume 6 hits up, maybe I'll continue out for volume 6 ends. But if you guys enjoyed this volume and RWBY, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you guys disliked all of Blake's parts, you guys enjoyed the fight scenes, did you dislike some parts or whatnot? What are your thoughts and feelings for RWBY volume 5? And what are you guys' predictions for volume 6? Because there's a lot of stuff that could possibly go on, and now the ball's rolling now. So can't wait to see a teaser for volume 6. So anyway, I'll see you guys later. Take care, guys. Matane, and see you when volume 6 hits out.